Hello, my name is Benjamin Beratius, and this is my PowerPoint on the principles of information security, what stood out to me. So, for Chapter 1 on introductions to the management of information security, this chapter, was very important as it opened us up to the world of information security. This chapter brings up the very basic focal points of information security to prepare us for the rest of the book, and also get readers excited to learn the many facets of information security. What I found very interesting from this chapter was how important information security specialists are and how varied they can be. They can have a multitude of tasks, and they're all very skilled in a number of fields and are tasked with keeping integral assets protected. It really showed how crucial these people are to keeping information assets safe, preparing for incidents, and keeping organizations running smoothly. Also in Chapter 1, I never really thought about the scale of threats that information security faces on a daily basis. When I think of protection from threats, my first thoughts are of hackers or human errors, but this chapter really opened my eyes to threats like forces of nature that could be anywhere from tsunamis, earthquakes, fires, and they can happen at any time and anywhere, and that's, really terrifying. It could also be hardware failures and even technological obsolescence, stuff I never really thought about. And this chapter also introduced the importance of leadership in information security. As someone who has been a leader in many projects, from my Eagle Scout project to school projects, I learned it can be very difficult to be a leader. But if you're an effective leader who can lead their group and stay organized, you'll be a very successful team. Moving on to Chapter 2, Compliance with Laws and Ethics. I found this chapter on laws and ethics does a good job distinguishing the many types of laws that govern us and how organizations act within the law. I found it very interesting how most companies will work with law enforcement to prosecute their own employees if they commit a crime. I normally thought that most of the time that the companies would back their employees, but companies really have to stay protected of themselves. This chapter also discusses how in recent years there's been an important debate between privacy and safety when it comes to technology as well as monitoring. It really made me think about the kinds of things I do online that people could be using for their own gain. When I receive targeted ads based on things I search in Google, like plane tickets, it really makes me wonder, what is being recorded in the 21st century? We get to use these revolutionary services, but at what cost? I've seen ads pull up into my social media, into my daily activities, on things that I was searching, and it makes me really wonder, what kind of privacy do we still have today? And one factor that really stood out to me in Chapter 2, as well as was in the class assignment, on how many laws made by the government have not really caught up to the technology today. And I know a lot of people who have been victims of cybercrime, and many police agencies just don't really know how to handle it when it comes to cyber stalking and theft and hacking. They just don't really know what to do. So we really need to work harder in order to increase our protection of the law online. And Chapter 2 also distinguishes that policy is a standard that a company will hold its employees to, while law is made by the government. And it's very important to distinguish this, as these two terms can be a little confusing initially when you read them. Moving on to Chapter 3 with Governance and Strategic Planning for Security, it really introduces how organizations plan and make policies in order to suit their needs. Each company has their own different values and ethics, just like people, so it's important to understand that not every organization will act the same. Planning is a very important key step to success in almost anything. However, it's important to note that things may not always work out as planned. Any plan can fall apart. This is true for organizations and life, so that's why many organizations must utilize protocols and strategies to prepare for unexpected situations. I think that a considerable amount of effort should always be put into planning. Making sure to use the best use of staff and assets, it decreases the chance of error, and it makes your projects just go much more smoothly. Another important thing to note: in order to plan properly, you must delegate actions to the right people, whether it be from chief information officers or IT specialists. There has to be proper actions done by the right parties. If a leader has good governance or the right practices, they'll be able to get done what they need to provide the best strategy for the company they work for. Whenever I do proper planning for assignments in school, they always go much more smoothly and faster. From anything, Doing proper planning is the key to success in anything. Okay, so in Chapter 4, we have Information Security Policy, and this chapter discusses the importance of strong policy making. Policies can be used for a number of things, from protecting companies from risks, organizing management of vital instructions, all sorts of things. Policy is very important because it's one of the most affordable ways to prevent risks. These policies can set how a company functions and are crucial to the success of the company. Policies also need to be well structured and fit within the needs of the law. Just like anything important in a company, they must be updated frequently in order to achieve the most success. Keeping policy updated is significant because it is these policies that not only keep a company from running smoothly, they also protect the company in the event of an error. They can even aid a company when errors occur. All this makes policy integral to the part of the information security program. Just like in real life, you gotta keep things updated. I make sure to keep my passwords updated on my computer and keep my firewalls updated just to make sure that they're doing what they need to be doing, just like policy. This chapter also distinguishes that the three types of information security policies. Having different types of policies is important to organize as well as assign the perfect situation to the perfect policy. We have enterprise information security program policies. They're good for management teams, for setting direction for the future. We have system-specific policies that are used to help guide procedures as well as implement assets. They're important to both technology and how companies run. And one we worked with exclusively during our assignments was the issue-specific information security policies that teach employees how to use company assets. They can always be useful for making sure that important company assets are used correctly, as well as legal protections. Drafting this policy for one of our homework assignments, as I talked about before, it was a very good way of showing me that they're very important and they could be really good instructional aids to using company assets. When I first got my current job, I was trained in all these types. I read all the documents and how to handle certain situations, how the company computer systems work, and what I need to do to use them correctly. Although it is different from an information security position, I still had to be informed about the various policies that my company enforces. That way I didn't make a mistake, everything was okay, and it worked out well. So policy is a very integral part of information security. Moving on to Chapter 5, Developing the Security Program, because security programs are the backbones of what makes information security programs run. These programs can be quite costly, but are essential for protecting organizations. These programs can be tasked with a multitude of assignments, and all of them are integral to security. Understanding how these programs are developed and making sure that they're the best way they can be is one of the most important things to understanding information security. Information security roles can be divided into definers, builders, and administrators, which all must do their part to make the program work. Dividing up tasks is important because it lets the program run better and faster. Management teams like chief information security officers can help to give direction to their employees in order to get the work done correctly and no one's working over each other. When management delegates the work to the right people, work can be completed efficiently. Dividing work among the various information security employees is vital to getting projects completed. Whenever I have a group project in school, which we often do, or even at work, the tasks have to be divided up evenly. That way we're not working all over each other. And, we put people to the best task. If someone's really good at researching, they research. If someone's good at speaking, then they'll do the public speaking for the project. It all makes the project more well-rounded, and it makes it completed faster as well. One of the biggest lessons I learned reading this book is that, and especially this chapter, is that humans are the cause for most errors in organizations. Humans have the highest probability of messing up, much more over technology. That's why I think it's important that this chapter highlights employee training and education. A trained employee will make far less mistakes and is one of the best ways to avoid problems. Training also helps complete tasks on time and keeps company security at its best and top. It's also important to remember that delegating and having the best staff to do the right jobs when it comes to information security can be challenging work. You have to make sure that people are qualified to do what they have to do. Leaders and managers, they have to use their skills and their creativity in order to make sure that all staff know what to do. An informed and well-led workforce will be able to achieve much more thanks to what a company has given them. That's why I go back to leadership is very important. into developing any type of policy or program. Moving on to Chapter 6, Risk Management, Assessing Risk. Now, every information security organization faces a multitude of risks on a daily basis, and it's crucial that these risks are assessed properly and constantly to protect company information as well as assets. There are 4 key pieces of having good risk management strategy, and they're integral to keeping organizations safe. Organizations must first identify their risks by looking into their assets and testing them to see how vulnerable they are. From our homework assignment from we went over this week, I saw how important it is to test every one of these assets for risks and to prioritize them properly. Starting out, I assumed this one asset was going to have a very high risk and the other one would have a very low risk. I thought, oh man, this one, it's definitely going to be in danger. However, it was the exact opposite, and the one that I thought had the high risk had actually the lowest risk, and the one with the lowest, I thought had the lowest risk, had the highest risk. So it's important to really test these vulnerabilities and prioritize them because it really protects everything, and it's the best thing you can do. And once all these risks are assessed, they have to be identified and put into the order on priorities and vulnerabilities. A company, like I said previously, a company must see how much risk they are willing to take on before they do something about it. A company must also begin to implement controls in the right places in order to keep assets safe. It is crucial that organizations use all 4 of these key steps when looking into the risk of their assets to achieve the best level of protection. Keeping assets and information safe is integral to the success of the company in general. And one example from the book that really showed me how important it is to keep up to date with risk and prioritize vulnerabilities was when the book talked about the Equifax data breach of 2017, where over 145.5 million people's personal information was compromised in some point. This is huge. That's almost half of the United States. The company knew about the vulnerability in their system for several months, but chose not to do anything about it and ended up paying a heavy price. I mean, there's no telling how much business the company lost after this breach. I wouldn't want to give Equifax any of my information knowing that they did that. And this just shows that risk management is important. It's an important process that needs to be taken very seriously. Okay, so Chapter 7 starts out with risk management and treating risk. So assessing risk and treating risk, they go hand in hand as both of these processes must work together to keep information and assets safe. One of the biggest ways to create a risk control strategy is to create a feasibility analysis and a cost-benefit analysis in order to see how well a control works with a risk and if the price is worth it, which is, of course, very important. You can do this type of analysis on your own when you observe what kind of protections best suit you. For example, you don't need a super expensive $300 antivirus software on your computer if all you do is shop on Amazon or trusted websites or go on Facebook. You don't really need that. But if you're working hard on computer systems and you run servers, you're going to need a pretty nice antivirus software. So, you have to test it on your own. People and organizations must do their own research in order to choose the best practices when it comes down to evaluating risk to assets and see if it's truly worth implementing. One way I try to manage my risk, my online activities, is in my personal life, is to constantly check my passwords for many accounts online. I'm always reading online of passwords that are especially vulnerable to risk in order to keep myself safe. I've had data breaches before in the past. I make sure to handle them quickly to keep my stuff online safe. As soon as my information is compromised, I work quickly to change passwords, set up dual authentication, extra defenses, and to protect my accounts. I understand that all my accounts are under risk at all time, but keeping things like my bank or my email safe is very high. So I prioritize them first over anything else. Now, Chapter 8 is about the security management models. Chapter 8 opens up to the varying models of information security programs and how they operate. Each security model starts out with a blueprint or a basic strategy to start and builds off of it. These models come with access controls which allow the right information to go to the right people, which is, of course, very important. It's very important that there are different levels of access based on different type of people in order to protect company information. On my job, I'm a lower level employee, but I'm only allowed certain access around my office. I'm allowed certain access to certain databases and logbooks and information, but it's very limited. I have more access than other employees, but much less than, say, my supervisor does. Our company handles a lot of sensitive information of many people, their birth certificates, their social security numbers, so it's important that access is limited to what each employee needs to do at their job in order to protect them. If that information got into the wrong hands, it could be a really big problem. And Chapter 9 is all about the security management practices. When it comes time to implement security practices into organizations and programs, you must always use the best of the best in order to achieve the best levels of protection. What stood out to me in this chapter is how many organizations look for their practices from the best of the industry in order to choose what practices they will use in the coming years. Now, this is equivalent to like the master, and the novice. The novice is looking up after the master. When you're going to complete a task, it's always wise to consult someone who knows more than you and has more resources than you. Microsoft, Oracle, IBM, these companies are top of their game when it comes to technology, and and a lot of companies look to them to see what are they doing to protect themselves. And I think that's really important. Just like I look up to my supervisors to see what I could be doing. When large organizations post about their best practices for security, it increases their protection for all companies as a whole, which is it's a truly great thing. Organizations can work together to increase their protection. That's always beneficial to everybody. It really shows how important cooperation can be, even for large as well as small organizations. I also found it important in this chapter that a strong information security program must constantly measure the data that is available to them. If a program is always monitoring the data that it has, the program will be able to stay updated with what it needs to thrive. Implementing the right models and practice takes a lot of communication and choices, but it will always pay off. Now, this is very important for the overall success of the organization as a whole. In my own personal experience, I found it that if I keep up to date with the important information, I will be more prepared for the obstacles. I'm taking Japanese here at Rowan, and I try and study every single day to make sure that I understand what's going on in class, and that what we learned that day in class. This is not only like prepare me for big exams when they come up in the midterm or the final, but for pop quizzes too. And I have a really good grade in my class. And it just goes to show that keeping up to date with what you need to know and monitoring what is going on will keep you successful, and processes are done at a faster rate. Okay, so Chapter 10 is all about planning for contingencies and how organizations should plan for contingencies and, of course, the unexpected. It's always very important to have a plan in the case of an emergency or any type of situation that could happen, because it will really help you pull out of a bad situation or prepare for something in the future. I always try to plan for a disaster and the unexpected, because you'll always come out better because of how prepared you are. This chapter also expresses how important it is to work on these plans as a team. A good contingency plan should, have several team members, managers, and a champion and a project manager. Having a well-rounded team will help make the plan more well-rounded, and it'll always make you prepared better for contingencies. It really shows, how important teamwork is. Just like at home with my family, we plan for big events that are coming up. We plan for an emergency situation, and as a team, as my family, we're able to prepare better for these sort of things. One of the most important points in this chapter describes the importance of disaster recovery plans. These plans are meant to help organizations deal with disaster situations and how to go about recovering from them. They could be anything from handling the disaster to recovering vital assets. A lot of important work goes into making these detailed plans, and they really help make the unexpected go much more smoothly. One way I plan for contingencies is whenever there's a big storm coming. When the storm is coming, I have a plan to charge my phone, have a reserve battery pack ready, make sure my computer files are safe on a cloud storage device in case the power goes out while I'm working on something. This ensures that all my information and data is safe, and I'll have a phone ready to use in case of a power outage or any other type of emergency. Planning for contingencies, having something ready, is always a good idea no matter what situation you're in. Chapter 11 goes into personnel and security. When making a proper information security program, it's vital to have the best staff, of course, well trained and skilled in what they are about to do to have a successful program. Information security can be a difficult field to work in, and it's often hard to find qualified staff, just like in any field, really. When hiring staff, it's important to make sure that applicants are qualified to do the task. As we observed in this chapter's case scenario, qualifications as well as certifications, they look great. However, they're not everything. You never know what you could find when someone applies to a job. I know people who work at my job who had no qualifications. They just needed a job. And of course my boss was like, I'm not really sure, you're not really good for the job. But in the end, they surprised everyone because they were great employees. I've had it many times. So you never know. So qualifications are good and all, but I think it's important to really weigh out and balance it, because you never know who you're going to find applying for your job, of course. And one important point made in this chapter is the way that organizations work to minimize employee misuse of assets. Most information security programs require that two people review over a task in order to make sure the task is completed properly. Organizations also have separate duties to make it harder to violate their codes. At my job, the company we work for only lets certain employees see company logbooks. When the logbooks are getting viewed, we have 2, 3, or 4 employees be present to make sure that everything is going well and that nothing is becoming compromised. We also have security cameras in place to minimize workplace violations. You're not going to do a lot of violations when there's a security camera over your head. These personnel security practices employed by organizations help protect the company themselves and their employees, and it makes it much harder for violations to happen. It's just better for everybody. And finally, with Chapter 12, we have protection mechanisms. And there are numbers of ways that organizations can protect themselves, and many of them involve important software programs. Many organizations use a collection of tools to protect themselves: firewalls, scanning tools, wireless network protection software, encryption, much more, VPNs, all sorts of things. Not only are these tools used to protect organizations, they're also used by millions of people around the world for personal protection. I was reading this chapter, I found it surprising that I use many of the same technologies that these big organizations use to protect my assets. My personal computer alone is full of firewalls that I've implemented, scanning tools to keep threats out and detect when there's a problem. On my computer, I have a few video game servers that I've run, and I always have, wireless network protection software to prevent people from gaining unauthorized access to my computer, my internet, my systems, anything. As another level of precaution, I only let trusted people that I know on my servers or networks, and I even use VPNs for encryption, because you never know what you can find. So protection mechanisms are important for me and for big organizations, for anybody. Although it is certain that you can never really be completely safe from risk, the more protection mechanisms that you have in place in the right places, the better off you are. Giving out access to your own assets or company assets should be done lightly, and you should always look for holes in your protection, just like in real life. It is important to be aware of the protection mechanisms out there, because there's always improving and changing. Just like people trying to get into your protection mechanisms, the protection mechanisms are improving, so it's kind of staying at the same rate. Understanding encryption methods, firewalls, and the systems in place is fundamental to keeping your information safe. I always keep my computer updated to the latest installments to keep myself safe. It's very important to stay up to date and not fall behind, because you need to keep yourself safe. So, in closing, information security, it's a very important field that can make a lot of connections to our everyday lives. Each chapter helped build on the many aspects of what encompasses information security and how important this field is in keeping organizations running smoothly. Observing the aspects of information security show me that a well-built information security program can do a lot of good for a company and keep it running just perfectly. I was surprised to see how much I could relate to the facets of information security as well as how much I could learn about protecting my own assets at home. It is without a doubt that information security is a very diverse field that will continue to grow and expand in this technological flourishing world, and it's very important to our everyday lives. Thank you.